Food was deliberately withheld or altered to study the effects of malnutrition. Dental care was denied in order to observe deterioration. Communities were treated not as citizens but as test subjects. Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. Before Canada became a country, before there were provinces, parliaments, or prime ministers, this land was already home. For thousands of years, Indigenous nations lived, governed, traded, farmed, hunted, raised families, and built complex societies across the land we now call Canada. Then ships arrived from Europe. What followed was not simply exploration. It was invasion, it was displacement, it was cultural destruction. This is the story of what Indigenous people endured. From violence and forced removal to residential schools and government-sanctioned experimentation. And why this history still shapes Canada till this very day. This is not ancient history, this is living memory. When Europeans first arrived in the 15th and 16th centuries, they encountered thriving nations, the Cree, the Blackfoot, the Mi'kmaq, the Coast Salish, and many others. But contact did not bring peace, it brought disease. Smallpox, measles, influenzas, illnesses Indigenous communities had no immunity against swept through the entire nations. In some regions, population loss reached catastrophic levels. Then came warfare and territorial expansion. European powers, first France, then Britain, claimed land without consent. Indigenous nations were pushed aside, forced into treaties they often did not fully understand or coerced under threat of starvation. The land was taken, and with it, autonomy. Now, as Canada expanded westwards in the 1800s, Indigenous people were confined to reserves, small, often infertile parcels of land, far from traditional hunting and fishing territories. The government imposed the Indian Act of 1876. This is a law designed not to empower Indigenous people, but to control them. Movement was restricted. Cultural ceremonies were banned. Traditional government systems were dismantled. Communities were deliberately starved in some regions to force compliance with the treaty terms. The message was clear: assimilate or suffer. Perhaps the most devastating chapter was the residential school system. For over a century, Indigenous children were forcibly taken from their families, sometimes by police, and sent to church-run, government-funded institutions. The stated goal was assimilation. The real outcome was trauma. Children were forbidden to speak their languages, they were punished for practicing their culture, they were told their identity was inferior. Many suffered psychological abuse, many suffered emotional abuse, many never returned home. In recent years, unmarked graves have been uncovered near former residential school sites. A stark reminder that for some children, the suffering ended in death. Survivors have described hunger, isolation, humiliation, and lifelong psychological scars. Entire generations were broken. And when those children grew up, they often struggled to parent because the system robbed them of family models, affections, and cultural grounding. This trauma did not end with the closure of the last school in 1996. It echoes till this very day. Few Canadians are taught that some Indigenous children in residential schools were subjected to nutritional experiments in the 1940s and 1950s. Food was deliberately withheld or altered to study the effects of malnutrition. Dental care was denied in order to observe deterioration. Communities were treated not as citizens but as test subjects. Healthcare neglect, forced sterilization in certain provinces, and systemic discrimination compounded the suffering. This was not accidental, it was policy. Language suppression, bans on ceremonies like the potlatch and Sundance, outlawing traditional governance, these were deliberate attempts to erase identity. And yet, Indigenous cultures did not disappear, they survived. Languages are being revived, cultural ceremonies are being restored, truth and reconciliation efforts are ongoing. Indigenous leaders, scholars, artists, and youth are reclaiming their history not as victims alone, but as resilient nations. Canada often tells a story of peace, order, and good governance, but peace for some came at devastating cost to others. Acknowledging this history is not about guilt, it's about truth. It is about understanding that reconciliation is not symbolic, it requires action. The land we stand on carries stories, some beautiful, some painful, To move forward as a country, we must be honest about both, because reconciliation is not about rewriting history. It is about finally telling it. I will see you in the next video.